Glenn, take me back to the day you were hired, or even when you were applying for this job and thinking about what the University of St. Thomas could do in terms of football, things that it hadn't done in the past.
We get asked quite often when we have these types of successes, could you ever have dreamed this? And I keep telling everybody, heck yeah. I mean, if you can't dream it, it's not going to happen. And certainly we knew this day could be possible. Several things had to work out, and they are working out. But when we even looked at the job, we believed that the University of St. Thomas had all of the things it needed to be successful. And I think the point of that, if you look at, we've won 13 national championships in all other major sports, but not one in football, probably speaks to the fact that when I was hired, I wasn't asked to navigate some sort of uncharted waters. I was simply being asked to raise the level of excellence in the football program up to the level of excellence commensurate with the rest of the university. And there were a lot of people that I think thought this job could be a sleeping giant or whatever adage you want to use. But we knew it would be a good one. Now, when we took it, we thought it was extremely important to build it for the long term. And people don't really understand that because they see us in our 5th year, and now I think our kids are, close to 60 wins or whatever it might be. But it's so important. If you look at our records, we took over the 2-8, and we focused on just getting a little bit better every year. So we went 7-3 our first year, and I think built some unbelievable foundations, more mental than physical. And then we took it another step and went to our first playoff appearance the next year, went 11-2, and lost in the quarterfinals out at Linfield. And then the next year beat Linfield and went 12-1. The next year went to the semis, won the quarterfinals, went 13-1, and now we sit here having won our semifinal game, going in the Stag Bowl at 14-0. So it's easy to chart the logistical improvements. Certainly, I'm very happy that we've been able to grow every year in our record. But I also think it's very important that we grow every year in terms of our belief in the family. And family is a word that we use a lot around here, and I know a lot of people, in my opinion, throw it around inappropriately. But the reason why we are where we are after 5 years is because our kids have bought into the idea of family.
And you've not just, you mentioned this after the quarterfinal win, but it certainly cements with a semifinal win. You've built not just a team, but a program, because you guys have turned over so many of these starting positions 2-3 times, and you have basically one guy who was here, Mike Valisano, who was here for
it. Well, I think it's important to remember there's a huge difference, in my opinion, between a good football program and a good football team. There's a lot of good football teams, but boy, it takes some longevity and some consistency to be a good football program, and I believe that is what we have here. I do think that what terrifies me, and there are different motivating factors for any coach, and certainly I'm motivated by positive things, and I'm motivated by negative things, to be honest with you. And what terrifies me is when you see great teams that have been great for a while have down years where they're losing 3 and 4 and 5 games. To me, that's terrifying, and that fear is certainly a great motivator to stay on edge. And we understand that failure is, look, our program has embraced failure, and we might not have won as many games. We've won more than most people in the last 5 years, but there's still some that have won more games than us. And I think one of the things that we probably do really well as a team is we understand that we're going to learn our lessons in good times and in bad. And I do believe that anybody can handle the good times. That's easy. But we're going to define ourselves on how we handle the adversity and the bad times. And I think our kids do a fantastic job. And that's why you've seen the consistent growth throughout the last 5 years.
You talk a lot about heart, and I hate to talk about what you're not, but I don't think that this St. Thomas team is maybe the most individually talented St. Thomas team that you've had in the last few years?
I think that's a fair assessment, and I'm not going to sit here and say that we have the most 40-yard dash guys under a 4.5 or the most 400-pound benchers. And I think sometimes as coaches we get caught up in the measurables because it's an easy way to excuse negative things, and I can't stand that. I think at the end of the day you're basically left with a group of guys that are they willing to play for each other, and are they willing to give themselves up. And our kids have worn these bracelets for now about 100 days, and on it says family, and the acronym stands for forget about me, I love you. And it's a great reminder of our vow of selflessness that we took way back as a team in August. And if we are truly willing to put ourselves second and let the team stand up to whatever comes our way, we'll all get what we need. We'll all get what we deserve, whatever that is. but it's simply going to come as a byproduct of the family's success.
And it's the immeasurables and it's the heart of this team that kind of set it apart.
In my opinion, I mean, you said it earlier, I think we have great football players, don't get me wrong, but we have had other seasons where maybe more guys get accolades or more guys have big numbers. And I think one of the strengths of this team is when we have a little bit more diversity with our ball distribution on offense. We have a little bit more diversity with our statistics, and we're not a big stats team, on defense. And that's why it was imperative for us to focus on the family. And yeah, you could probably point to a couple other teams, maybe even last year's team, which also had a phenomenal heart. But yeah, the reason why we win games around here, first and foremost, is because of our hearts and our minds. I've said that for years. We will win games at St. Thomas because of our arms and our legs, and we do. But we win more because of our minds and our hearts, without a doubt.
Last year, you had the opportunity to go to the Stag Bowl. You accompanied Fritz Waldvogel when he was a finalist for the Ghilardi Trophy. What did you learn last year that you think is going to help you guys out this year?
It's a tough trip to take. It was one that you come off a loss in the semifinals, and the last thing I really wanted to do was go down to Salem and watch somebody else live your dream. That's tough. Mm-hmm. But what I realized was if I really wanted to be honest and say that's where we want to be, I thought I needed to see it as a coach. So I went down there. Unfortunately, Fritz was up for the Player of the Year, and we had a wonderful time. But I was down there for 3 days, and what kept just sticking in my craw was how much of a failure I felt like because I didn't have the rest of the family with me. And there were 58 guys that could have been on the plane and 140 other guys that could have been indulging in that experience, in a whole community and village back here at St. Thomas that would have loved to be able to go through that. And that I truly felt like I had failed. But I also knew that, like I've talked about before, those failures are something that we're going to embrace. We're not going to look down on. And I think that week down there and seeing that certainly was a factor in leading to this point where we are today.
Talk about today's game. You guys defeat Oshkosh 28-14. Probably the best atmosphere I've seen here outside of a St. John's game.
Or maybe a Bethel game, but very similar, outside of a homecoming game. Yeah. And I think a lot of that is attributed to the Titan fans. They traveled real well, too. We had a great crowd. It was standing room only. But it was everything it was meant to be. A little bit of snow, a little bit of cold, the lights on, and Upper Midwest football played by two pretty tough teams, and I think the fans appreciate that. Yeah, we're also blessed to have the opportunity to play at home, which was not something that we had last year, and I think people rallied around that as well. But the atmosphere was fairly electric, and that's trite to say, but it's the truth. I mean, it was the feeling of excitement was palpable, and it certainly crescendoed and ebbed and flowed throughout the game. But it was a pretty neat atmosphere. And
a big time feel. You've got obviously network cameras here, and you mentioned the lights are on. It's a special kickoff time, and you've got official video review and all that. So all the bells and whistles that a big time game gets.
Yes, and I think that is not easy to handle. We're not used to getting on planes. We're not used to having instant replay. We're not used to being on ESPN, and we're fine with that. I don't care. We are who we are, and we love it. But last year when we ran into that semifinal atmosphere down in Whitewater, there were some things that as a head coach, I didn't have our guys properly prepared for, namely the reviews and the TV timeouts and those types of things. And again, I think that even though we didn't win that game, the experience and how we handled that certainly helped us. And I think experience is something that's so important to me. Our seniors are getting ready to play their 15th playoff game. 15th, that's a season and a half more than other kids get to play. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that, and our kids believe, that experience does not entitle us to a darn thing. It doesn't. But what it does do is give us a pretty good benchmark of if we want to be there, the work it takes to get there. And that's what you saw today.
There's a lot of talk about how young this team is, but in reality, as far as I can see, it's really focused on the offense because the defense is, it almost seems like the defense kind of has interchangeable parts that you can kind of run guys in. The defense has been kind of self-rebuilding over the last few years. But tell me a little bit about all this youth on the offensive side. Well,
I'd like to start with the defense, if that's all right, because I really believe in vicious cycles and virtuous cycles in life. And I think you're right. We are in a virtuous cycle when it comes to our defense. And I think a lot of that is attributed to our defensive staff, Coach Kaczynski, Coach Anderson, all the other assistants. And our kids understand that that if you do your job properly, the scheme is appropriate to stop whatever we might see that week. And some weeks we'll be good at it, some weeks we won't, but they certainly believe in the scheme. And if you look back through, not just this year, but if you look back through the last 2 years, our offense, pretty good. There's no question about that. But I think our defense has been our stalwart force that keeps us buoyant even in the most difficult of times. And when the times are good, boy, that's where you really start flowing. As far as our offense, you're right. We're very, very young. I think we lined up in our we got Danny Ferrazzo back, which was nice. He's a sophomore, so he's like an elder statesman around here, you know. But in our first playoff game, our top 6 receivers were freshmen. Our top 2 starting tackles were freshmen. Our top 2 running backs were freshmen. And just tonight, we're sitting out there and we're going at 4th and 1.5, and there's a TV timeout. And I'm looking at the kids in the huddle, and we got 6 freshmen, guys that were playing high school football a year ago, 6 freshmen going out on the field. And I said, this would be interesting. And we converted it, and I think that certainly makes you feel good about what could be the future if we continue to work as hard as we have been.
Tell me about Matt O'Connell and just describe him as a quarterback. Because to me, he seems like, maybe he's already what Dakota Tracy was as a senior. Maybe he's a little bit better. Maybe he's not there yet, but he seems like he has he's off to a really good start anyway.
He is off to a great start. I don't think anyone would negate that undefeated and 13-0 as a starter is a good start. I do think it's a little bit unfair, and I don't like that word because life is not fair. A little unfair to compare him to Dakota because they are different. A lot of people see a quarterback who's shorter, 5'11", 6 foot, and who can run, and they say, oh, those are the same guy. They're 2 different guys. And for the point in time that our program was in, Dakota was absolutely what we needed, there's no question. And now for the point in time, Matt has taken over, and Dakota as a starter was 28-2, and that's a pretty impressive record. But I think that Matt brings different skill sets. There are some things Dakota did better than Matt, and there are some things Matt does better than Dakota. But you're right. I think a lot of people will start to compare Matt as a sophomore to Dakota as a senior, just because that's human nature. This is the next year. And one thing I can say about Matt is he plays big in big games. And even when he has some downfalls, he doesn't get too down. He never gets too high. He never gets too low. And tonight, he did not have his best game. Matt probably had, to be very frank, his 3rd worst game of the year.
All right.
Tonight, in the national semifinal, he threw 2 picks, which is not who we are. I think we've only thrown 2 picks in the last 6 weeks. Or Matt's only thrown 2 picks in the last 6 weeks. And he had a fumble, which was crucial. But he didn't let that, he didn't pout, he didn't whine, he didn't mope. He learned from it, and he converted some pretty big runs when we needed it to. And there were a couple plays that, boy, I just screwed up the call, and he made us right. And I think that's a testament to his mental toughness. That's a pretty big deal in our program.
Made things right by checking out of it, or made things right by making something out of nothing?
Making something out of nothing. There were 2. Well, the first interception, I completely got out-called. I had called the bootleg, and they brought edge pressure, and they weren't showing that. Completely out-called by the Oshkosh coaches. And in that situation, I didn't make his job any easier because we forced a hot throw, and their guy tipped it and stepped in the way. And that was as much my fault, if not more so, than his. But I tell him routinely, I said, there are times, even if I'm on my best game as a play caller, and I believe this, your best game, you're probably calling it about a 75% clip when you say, who has the better play call, the offensive guy or the defensive guy? That's on my best day, which means 1 out of every 4 plays is going to be a bad play call. And sometimes as a quarterback, your job, it's to make the big play, but it's to mitigate the bad plays as well. And that's something that he's done a pretty good job of. Now, physically, he's probably about a 200-yard passer a game. I don't know the exact stats, but he's probably somewhere in that neighborhood. But it's his ability to create final down rushes that move the chains that I think, he was 3 for 3 in 4th downs today, and he picked up a couple 3rd downs, and some of those were improvised, some of those were called. But being a dynamic quarterback is very important to us.
And Brenton Braddock, I don't know where he was on the depth chart when the season started.
4th.
Okay. So, talk about his rise from 4th to 1st, and, 1st with a vengeance, really.
Well, it wasn't helped by the fact that he was out for the first 4 weeks of the season. So he came off an injury last year, and he got hurt again this year. And so he didn't even suit up for the first several games, and then got a little bit of mop-up time in games maybe 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there. And he's stalwart. And I appreciate that about him because he won the war of attrition. And, there's other guys that are going to run faster than Brenton, and there's bigger guys, and there's stronger guys, but he's the guy that's rushing for 100-yard games for a team that's going to the national championship. And he does all the little things right. And a lot of people say, yeah, what does that mean? We can do a lot with our offense because Brenton gets it. He conceptualizes. Some guys memorize, if they do this, I do this. If they do this, I do this. If you call this, I do this. And he understands the scheme, so we can align him in a myriad of different alignments, and we can run an entire offense without having to substitute him out all the time. And I think that's something that goes unnoticed. And as a coach, it's very refreshing to know that you have that type of guy on the field that can just figure it out.
On the defensive side, as well as on the offensive side, you guys have had a lot of injuries. Shuffling guys back in and out over the course of the season. And I wanted to talk about one move, which was moving Chinny Oji, from cornerback to safety, and he's played really well at safety.
Chinny was an All-American corner coming into the season, and when Chinny got his start, it was actually his sophomore year. You were probably here against Linfield, which was one of the most potent offenses we've seen in our 5 years here with Bomey, and just great coaches, and they do a wonderful job. And we just thought he was ready, and his time was that game, and he stood out, and he's been a stalwart force at corner for us since then. But within 8 days' time, we lost both safeties, both seniors, both guys went down, and that's the way the odds go. And we knew the best thing for us, maybe not the best thing for him, but the best thing for us as a program was to put him at safety. And then I think Coach K did a really nice job, because at that point, once you get him out of the corner spot and you put him in, you put him at safety, now you kind of open yourself up to maybe a few different packages that you didn't have before, because a guy's not just playing a lockdown corner, whatever you want to call him out there. And so now he's been moved around in the secondary and in the linebacking core. You've seen us, last game, he had a pick, he had 2 tackles for a loss and a sack. Yeah. And I think our coaches have done a real nice job of not guessing, but putting him in a really good situation. So out of a tough situation came a very strong positive. And I think that's apropos and indicative of the type of team we are. But Chinny he's a blessing and a talent that we don't get, in every year. He's certainly a fantastic football player. And to be frank with you, maybe the reason why he didn't end up at a scholarship school was because he was injured his senior year in high school and he didn't have that type of film, and we were able to get him here. But boy, it's tough to put into words or to quantify what he means to our defense, because he can do so many different things, and he's so explosive, and he's so selfless.
Yeah, and a big challenge next week, obviously, for the secondary. I don't know how much of a chance you've had to watch Mount Union.
We've seen him quite a bit.
So, between Jasper Collins and Chris Denton, those are 2 guys who can really stretch the field.
Yeah, they'll have you on your toes for 60 minutes. There's no question about it. And not only do they have good players, and there's a program that has a virtuous cycle going on. And they lose guys to the NFL, and all of a sudden they got another NFL guy coming in. Then they lose that guy to the NFL, and they got 2 other guys that have you in fits. And I think that speaks to Coach Karras and his staff and how well, not just he recruits, but he develops them. Certainly recruiting is the beginning of it. You got to get them there. But once you get them there, he develops them in the system. And they have a very defined and strong system that they believe entirely in, and it's lethal. And we're going to have our work cut out for us. We have not seen the game today, but just like last week, we've been following Oshkosh probably for the better part of a month and a half, so we kind of had an idea that maybe we'd meet up, and we've been doing the same with Mount Union, because in the back of our head we kind of thought that might be the matchup, even though most of the other people out there didn't, but we kind of thought that might be. And so yeah, they're tough to defend, there's no doubt. They are the standard in Division III, without a doubt.
And you guys haven't played Mount Union, but you played Wisconsin Whitewater last year. And so do you think you guys have at least some idea of the quality of the team you might be up against?
Maybe. Anytime you play a team for the first time, there's an anxiety on both sides, because you don't have a familiarity with them like you would a St. John's or a Bethel, or a team that you play year after year. But there's also a freshness and a newness to that is kind of interesting. It's going to be a different level, but it's probably a level close. I don't want to underestimate it. It's probably close to a level we've seen, whether that be in the teams we've beaten at the highest levels this year, or like you said, in a Whitewater last year. We know this year's Mount Union team is not last year's Mount Union team, and they are loaded for bear, and their seniors are prime, table set. But yes, we have seen what we have played against the national champions, and we have seen what that looks like. And if we want to continue this journey in the manner that we want to continue it, we're going to have to play a much better game than we played a year ago in the semifinals, much like we did play a better game today.
And lastly, I know you're a pretty emotional guy, and you obviously have a busy week coming up, but you got a pretty important role in motivating this team to take the field in the Stag Bowl. What do you think you might say to them on Friday?
Well, I'm not a big fire and brimstone guy right before the game, so I don't know if it's going to be in the pregame speech, but what we do preach quite often, and I think people will think I'm joking when I say this, but we don't talk about winning and losing. We never talk about winning games because we don't control winning. And I know there's a lot of coaches out there that say, that guy's an idiot. Of course you control winning. No, we don't. We control how hard we work, how long we work for, and are we being the best us as we can. And although that's not grammatically correct, I think you understand what I mean when I say this time of year. What we've learned through the last 4 years is the teams that are the most successful this time of year are not the ones with the sacks or the yards. They're the ones that are truest to who they are. And that's all we really try and be. If we can be the best that we can be, whether we win a game or lose a game, I would be entirely satisfied. And we've hit that several times in the last couple of years. And I don't think it's going to be difficult to motivate a team. We have 8 goals, and the one at the top that isn't crossed off yet is what we're going to see on Friday night. So if I have to get them up for this, I wouldn't consider my job well done throughout the week. But I do believe if our guys truly stick together, there isn't anything that they can't accomplish. I understand the task is enormous, and it deserves to be enormous because the team we're playing is not just a great team, but they've done it for so long. But I also believe I can't focus on them. And as much as I respect the heck out of them, and I do, our focus is going to be on us, no one else.